I've never been what you might call a company man. My late wife Beverly often said that I was born a 70-year-old grump. Now that I'm 78, that joke seems especially appropriate. People around me annoy me with their clutter and idle talk. At my age, you begin to appreciate silence more than chatter. My name is Chester Baxter. I worked all my life as a history teacher at Pasadena High School, retiring 11 years ago. For almost half a century, I lived in the same house on Lambert Avenue, a small but cozy one-story structure with a porch and garden where Beverly grew roses. After she died 5 years ago, I abandoned the garden. It wasn't that I missed her flowers. It was just that every time I looked at those stunted bushes, I remembered her nagging me for not watering them properly. Now instead of roses, it's just grass, which I cut twice a month. The neighbors look askance, but I don't care. The house has become my sanctuary. Every single thing in here has a story. The worn leather armchair I bought back in the 60s when we were first married, the desk where I used to grade papers, the bookshelves filled with history books, and detectives I'm rereading for the third time. Even the faded wallpaper in the living room I hadn't changed since the 90s. Beverly had chosen it, and now it was part of my memory of her. My daily routine is the same. Rise at 6 in the morning, a cup of strong black coffee on the veranda. Read the morning paper? Yes, I'm one of those dinosaurs who still prefers paper. Then a walk around the block. After lunch, working in the garden or reading books. And in the evening, TV or old vinyl records. Sometimes I go to the library or to the little cafe on the corner, where I am already known as Mr. B and bring black coffee and apple pie without too many questions. The quiet, measured life of an older man, nothing special. But recently I did something completely out of the ordinary. I went to Monaco for the first time in my life. Yes, at the age of 78. Why go there? Because of Beverly and our favorite movie, Only Girls in Jazz. We re-watched it dozens of times, and every time the scenes of the Azure Coast appeared on the screen, my Bev sighed. We'll go there one day, Ches. Imagine, you in a white suit, me in a wide-brimmed hat. We sit in a cafe and look at millionaires' yachts. But there were always reasons to postpone this trip. First, she had to raise her son, then save up for his education, then help with the down payment on his house. Beverly never got to see Monaco. Cancer took her quickly, 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. On her last day, she took my hand and said, "Promise me you'll still go there, Chaz, for both of us." For 5 years, I put off that promise. First, I told myself it was too soon, that the wound was still fresh. Then I convinced myself that at my age, there was no need for such journeys. But this spring, going through old albums, I came across a picture of us together, taken on our 40th wedding anniversary. Beverly was looking at me with that special smile that always meant, "Don't be a nerd, Chaz." And so I did. After spending almost a month applying for a passport, booking a hotel, and buying airline tickets, I have mediocre computer skills and I don't trust travel agents. I finally set off on my first trip abroad. 2 weeks in Monaco is a crazy waste of money for a retiree, but I felt I had to do it. For both of us. I have to admit, Monaco stunned me. This small country where every second person seems to be a millionaire, and every third person a celebrity was like it was from another planet. I felt like a clumsy old elephant among elegant gazelles, but I still enjoyed every day. I sat in cafes on the seafront, though not in a white suit. The heat was unbearable. Looked at the yachts, the size of a small city, tasted the local cuisine, went to the Oceanographic Museum. Each evening I would mentally tell Beverly about the previous day, imagining how she would marvel at all she had seen. Edwin, my son, did not understand this impulse. When I informed him of my plans, he only hummed and asked, "Will there be money left over for the funeral?" Typical Edwin, always thinking about the practical side. At 46, he's already a department head at an insurance company, married to Winifred, a woman with ambition the size of Mount Whitney, and a tongue sharper than a scalpel. They have no children. Career is more important, as they always say. My relationship with my son is complicated. After his mother died, he visited me less often, calling only when necessary. When he comes, it is only to check whether the house, which, in his opinion, stands on golden land and is wasted, has not collapsed yet. Winifred hints every time we meet that at my age it's time to consider a nursing home. You'll be taken care of by professionals there, Chester, she says with feigned concern and pure calculation in her eyes. I'm not blind, and I know exactly what they want. My house is really worth a lot of money. The neighborhood has become prestigious in the last 20 years. Prices have skyrocketed. And I have savings, not millions, of course, but enough to make Edwin and Winifred lick their eyes like hungry cats at the fish store. They think I don't notice their glances when it comes to my finances, don't understand their concern for my future. Every visit turns into the same thing. First, the routine questions about my health, then a tour of the house with comments like, "This roof needs to be re-roofed," or "The pipes are about to burst." And then the invariable conversation about how it would be practical to sell this old house, invest the money wisely, and move to a place where you will be taken care of. One day, Winifred even brought in brochures of various nursing homes, spread them out on my kitchen table, and began touting the benefits of each. "This one here, for example, has its own pool and weekly dance parties," she chirped, pointing her finger at a glossy picture of smiling old men in a pool. I grabbed all those brochures and threw them in the trash, declaring that the only place I was going to spend the rest of my life was my own home. Edwin blushed then and started saying something about my stubbornness and ingratitude, about how he and Winifred cared about my future, and I didn't appreciate it. I reminded him that I was capable of taking care of my future on my own, as I had done for the previous 70-odd years. The conversation ended with him slamming the door and a week of silence. Beverly always got along better with my son. She was good at smoothing over our conflicts, finding compromises, said we were too much alike, both stubborn as donkeys, proud beyond belief. Maybe she was right. But after she died, it only got worse. The buffer that cushioned our clashes was gone. In Monaco, I hardly thought about Edwin. Frankly, it was a relief not to think of his constant discontent, not to hear Winifred's hints, not to feel like a burden to my own son. 2 weeks of pure freedom with no obligations or expectations. I even turned off my old cell phone, which I usually only use for calls. No calls from America, I told myself as I checked into a small but clean hotel near the harbor. But all good things come to an end sometime. On the 13th day of my stay in Monaco, I did turn on my phone to let Edwin know my return date so he could pick me up at the airport. I found 7 missed calls from him and 3 messages asking where I was and why I wasn't answering. The last message had a distinct tinge of annoyance. If you lost your phone or forgot to charge it, that's one thing, but if you're just ignoring it, that's too much, Dad. Call me back immediately. I called back. Edwin answered after the first beep, as if he was sitting there with the phone in his hand. "Papa, at last. Where have you been?" "In Monaco, like I told you. Decided to take a break from the phone." A pause, then a strange chuckle. "In Monaco? Really? I thought you were joking when you mentioned it." "Since when did I start joking about my plans, Edwin?" Okay. How's it going for you there? I bet you blew all your money on casinos and girls?" His laugh sounded strained to me. I ignored the inappropriate joke. "I'm coming back the day after tomorrow. Flight arrives in Los Angeles at 15:30. Can you meet me?" Again the pause, longer. Uh, I'm afraid I can't make it, Dad. Vinny and I have an important meeting that afternoon. Why don't you take a cab?" Typical Edwin, always finding a reason not to help, though perhaps I'm being unfair. Grown men have their own lives, their own obligations. "Sure, I'll take a cab," I replied, trying not to show disappointment. "Great. Listen, Dad, we've had some changes have come up. We'll talk when you get back, okay?" Something in his voice alerted me, but I decided not to ask over the international connection. "Okay, we'll talk. Bye, Edwin." "Bye, Dad. Welcome back in advance." At that moment, I didn't yet know that the changes my son mentioned would turn my whole life upside down. I didn't know that my home, my cozy corner on Lambert Avenue, I would never see again. I didn't know that betrayal could come from those closest to me. Enjoying my last days in Monaco, I still believed I was coming home. My penultimate day in Monaco was surprisingly overcast. Low clouds covered the usually bright blue sky, and the Mediterranean Sea had lost its azure hue to a steel gray. I sat on the terrace of a small cafe, sipping an espresso and watching the few tourists scurrying to escape the rain. The inclement weather oddly matched my mood, a mixture of slight sadness at soon parting from this fabulous place and anticipation of returning to my quiet home in Pasadena. After my conversation with Edwin, a strange sense of unease lingered in my mind. Something in his voice and the way he spoke of some changes made me nervous. In 50-plus years of fatherhood, I'd learned to recognize when my son wasn't telling me the truth. When he was young, he used to mumble and pause unnaturally when he wrecked my car or failed an exam. But now he's 46, what secrets can a grown man have from his elderly father? Perhaps he and Winifred had finally decided to have a child? No, I don't think so. Winnie had always been adamantly opposed. Children ruin a career and a figure, she had once declared at Christmas dinner, eliciting a disapproving look from Beverly. Perhaps they had decided to move. Edwin had long talked about a possible promotion that would require a move to San Francisco. Or, no, not that. The thought that they might have done something to my house in my absence flashed through my mind, but I immediately dismissed it as absurd. Even Edwin wouldn't dare. The rain intensified, and I decided to go back to the hotel. I had to finish packing and maybe buy a couple more souvenirs. Beverly would never forgive me if I came back from Monaco without a magnet for the fridge or a cup with a view of the princely palace. In my room, I picked up the phone again, wondering if I should call Edwin back and find out at once what changes he had in mind. But the international connection was expensive, and what was the use of guessing? I would see for myself in 2 days. Instead, I decided to call my old friend and neighbor, Perry Huxley. Perry and I had been friends for 30 years. He was a retired chemistry professor, and we often spent evenings over chess and bourbon, discussing politics, history, and ungrateful children. Before I left, I asked him to pick up my mail and keep an eye on the house. "Perry, it's Chester." "Chaz, what a surprise. You're back already?" Perry's voice sounded strangely tense. "No, still in Monaco. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. How's my house? Everything okay?" "The house?" Perry paused and my heart sank. "Chester, have you talked to Edwin lately?" "Yeah, just yesterday. He mentioned some changes, but he didn't elaborate. Did something happen?" "I think, he hesitated again. "I think you should talk to your son, Chaz. I don't want to be the bearer of unexpected news. Now I'm definitely worried. Perry, you're my friend. Tell me straight. What's wrong with my house?" "Look, I'm not sure I have the right. Well, there's been some activity around your house for the last 5 days. Cars with real estate company logos, then trucks. I tried to ask the workers what was going on, but they just said they were following orders from the new owners. I tried to call Edwin, but he didn't answer. I felt the blood rush from my face. The new owners? What the hell is this? Perry, are you telling me my house was sold? Without my knowledge? That's impossible. I don't know the details, Chaz, I really don't. Maybe it's some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe Edwin's just doing some repairs while you're away. Although it's odd that he didn't give any notice. Thank you, Perry, I'll take care of it." My voice sounded cold, even to myself. I immediately dialed my son's number. It was ringing, but there was no answer. I tried again, same thing. I called the home number, and the answering machine with Winifred's voice said they couldn't answer right away, but would call back. I left a message trying to speak calmly, but feeling rage boiling up inside. "Edwin, it's Dad. Call me back right away. I need to know what's going on with my house." I spent the next 2 hours on pins and needles, constantly checking my phone. Finally, it rang. "Edwin." "Dad? Sorry, I was in a meeting." "What's happening to my house, Edwin?" I decided not to waste time with pleasantries. "Oh, that," he hummed nervously. "I told you we had some changes. I wanted to discuss it when we met. Discuss it now. Perry said he saw realtors and trucks." "You old gossip." There's a bit of irritation in his son's voice. "Look, Dad, it's all for the best. Vinny and I have been saying for a long time that you need something a little more age-appropriate." I felt a chill go down my spine. "You sold my house?" My voice sounded almost a whisper. "Technically, it was my house, too," Edwin said with an unpleasant note of smugness. "You were the one who gave me power of attorney 2 years ago when you went into surgery. Remember?" I remembered. Heart surgery, standard procedure for someone my age, but still with risks. I put my son in power of attorney so he could manage my affairs in case of complications. But the surgery went well, I made a full recovery, and we never brought it up again. That power of attorney was in case I was incapacitated. There was metal in my voice. I'm alive and well and sane. You had no right. Legally, Edwin parried calmly. The power of attorney is valid until revoked, and you didn't revoke it. I was breathless at this cold calculation. Where are my things, Edwin? I asked, trying to keep my composure. We took the most valuable things for safekeeping. The rest, we had to get rid of. The new owners wanted an empty house. Get rid of it. My books, my vinyl collection, my Beverly photo albums, my whole life. Where am I going to live, Edwin? Have you thought about it? Of course I have. He's come to life. Winnie and I have thought of everything. We've got a big house, a separate guest room. You'll live with us, under our supervision. At your age, it's the most sensible thing to do. I kept quiet, not trusting myself to open my mouth. If I spoke, I would either curse or burst into tears, neither of which I could afford. Dad, are you there? I'm here, I finally said. And I'm not going to live with you, Edwin. Oh, come on, where will you go? You don't have any other options? I'll find options. Now tell me one more thing. What about my car? That wreck? He snorted contemptuously. Sold it for parts. Winnie found offense. Don't worry, the money from the house and the car will work. Winnie and I will invest it wisely. My old Buick was Beverly's last gift to me. She bought it for our last anniversary, 6 months before her diagnosis. So you can drive me to picnics when we're both in the nursing home, she said then, handing me the keys. I have to go now, Edwin, I said icily. I'll see you when I get back. And no, Dad, you realize we did this for your own good, don't you? There was a fake concern in my son's voice. At your age. We'll talk when I get back, I repeated and pressed the disconnect button. The remaining hours in Monaco turned into torture. The beauty of the city was no longer pleasing. The local cuisine had lost its flavor, and the thought of returning to Pasadena to a completely changed life made me dizzy. But there was no way to cancel or postpone the flight. I had already spent almost all my pocket money, and my credit card was approaching its limit. I barely slept that night, pondering my options. Sue my own son? With power of attorney, the chances of winning were minimal. Besides, litigation dragged on for years, and I needed a place to live now. Live with Edwin and Winifred? The thought made me shudder. To be homeless at 78 after decades of honest labor? The injustice was burning me from the inside out. On the morning of the last day, I decided to just walk around the city, trying to clear my thoughts. Unexpectedly, I found myself in St. Nicholas Cathedral, an imposing Roman Catholic church with snow-white walls. I'm not particularly religious, but something compelled me to go inside. The cool semi-darkness of the cathedral had a calming effect. I sat down on a pew in the far corner and just breathed, looking at the play of light in the stained glass windows. Mentally, I talked to Beverly, imagining her sitting next to me, placing her small warm palm on my hand, as she always did in difficult moments. What should I do, Bev? I silently asked. Our boy has betrayed me, took everything I had. Beverly was always defending Edwin, finding excuses for his actions. He just hasn't found himself yet, Chaz, she said when her son dropped out of college after his first semester. He's confused. He needs our support, she insisted, when he got involved with a questionable company when he was young. He's our only child, she reminded me when I threatened to revoke his financial aid for another prank. But not even Beverly could justify this betrayal. He sold your roses, Bev, I said mentally. Sold our home, our life. What would you say now? In the silence of the cathedral, I could almost hear her answer. Do what you have to do, Chaz. You've always known how to do the right thing. By evening, I had packed my suitcase and paid off the hotel. I didn't feel like dinner, but I forced myself to go to a small restaurant near the harbor. There was an elderly couple sitting at a nearby table, holding hands and laughing softly, looking at each other with a tenderness that made my heart ache. That's what Beverly and I might have been like if she'd lived to be that age. Before I went to bed, I went over my finances one more time. I still had my pension, not luxurious, but stable. A small amount in a bank account to which, fortunately, Edwin had no access. I had always been careful in such matters. It should be enough for the first time, until I found a permanent place to live. In the morning, a cab came to pick me up to take me to Nice Airport. The driver, a young Moroccan with bottomless black eyes, for some reason mistook me for an Englishman. And all the way he told me in broken English about his dream of visiting London. I did not dissuade him. There was something soothing in this ordinary human conversation. The flight from Nice to Paris, then the long 13 hours to Los Angeles. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I watched old movies on a small screen in the headrest of the front seat, ate tasteless airplane food, and thought about what was waiting for me at home. Or rather, not home anymore. I didn't have a home anymore. Finally, the plane began to descend over Los Angeles. Below was a familiar landscape, an endless sea of low buildings, cut through by a network of freeways, heading toward the mountains in the north and the ocean in the west. Somewhere out there, among those millions of rooftops, was my home, now a stranger. The airport greeted me with the usual hustle and bustle, rushing passengers, flight announcements, the smell of coffee and fast food. I slowly made my way with the crowd to the exit, dragging my wheeled suitcase behind me. The mood was somber, but somewhere deep inside smoldered determination. I will not let Edwin and Winifred break me. I will live out my final years with dignity, without their help. At the arrivals hall, I caught a cab and gave my address on Lambert Avenue. I wanted to see everything with my own eyes before deciding what to do next. As the cab touched down, I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. Despite my son's betrayal, despite everything that had happened, a part of me still felt strangely relieved to be back in familiar places. Pasadena had been my home for the past 50 years, and no Edwin could change that. Outside the window, Los Angeles floated by, noisy, bright, contrasting with the elegant restraint of Monaco. In an hour, we would be in Pasadena, and I would finally see what was left of my old life. I didn't know what awaited me there, but I was ready to face it with my head held high. The cab turned smoothly onto Lambert Avenue, and I leaned forward, gazing at the familiar shape of the street. Everything looked the same neat lawns, the same driveways, the same mailboxes by the curb. Mrs. Johnston was still walking her fat pug, and the old maple tree in front of the Henderson house still spread its branches over the sidewalk. But as the car approached the lot where my house was supposed to stand, I felt my heart skip a beat. The house looked different, freshly painted a fancy gray blue instead of the usual beige, with a new roof and some weird metal fence instead of my old hedge. There was a shiny SUV in the driveway and two strange children playing on the lawn. "Are you sure this is the right address?" the cabbie asked, noticing my confusion. "Yes," I answered, muffled. "Quite sure." I asked him to drive on without stopping. I needed time to process what I'd seen, even though Edwin had warned me about the sale, but it was one thing to know, and quite another to see strangers in my own house. "Where to now?" the driver asked. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "Maybe to some cheap hotel nearby?" The cabbie suggested the Pine View Motel on the outskirts of Pasadena, not the most presentable place, but clean and inexpensive. I agreed, and 15 minutes later we were pulling up to a two-story building with a peeling sign. After paying the driver and getting my shabby suitcase, I headed to the front desk. The half-asleep receptionist, a guy in his 20s with an earring in his eyebrow, didn't even look at my ID, mechanically holding out a key card. "Room 205, second floor, left of the stairs," he mumbled, returning to his phone. The room was exactly as I'd expected. An impersonal box with a double bed, an ancient TV, and a bathtub with a leaky faucet. But I didn't care about comfort right now. I sank down onto the bed, feeling the fatigue and shock finally taking its toll. My home, my life, it was all gone. Sitting in that dreary motel room, I tried to gather my thoughts. What to do next? Where to go? How to live? Questions swarmed in my head, but there were no answers. The phone in my pocket vibrated. "Edwin." I didn't answer it. A minute later, a message came. "Dad, I know you've already arrived. Where are you? We're worried." They're worried. That's nice. After robbing me of my home, I decided that talking to my son could wait. I needed to see what was left of my old life first. I called Perry. "Chaz, you're back." My friend's voice sounded excited. "Where are you?" "At the Pine View Motel." "Perry, do you know what happened to my things?" I know, he sighed heavily. Edwin put most of it on the curb in boxes. I managed to salvage a few things. Your photo albums, a few books, a couple souvenirs. They're at my house. What about your car? Your Buick? Perry hesitated. It's still here, Chaz. It's parked on the curb in front of your old house, but, you're not going to like it. I felt my stomach clench with a bad feeling. What had been done to him? Someone had spray painted the word homeless on the hood and taped a note to the windshield that said, "Do not take it. The car belongs to a homeless old man who's coming to get it." Rage came over me in a hot wave. I knew whose handiwork it was. Winifred. Only she was capable of such subtle cruelty. "I'll be right there," I said to Perry. "I'll meet you at the house." I mean, you know. 20 minutes later, the cab dropped me off on Lambert Avenue, right outside my former home. Perry was already waiting there, shuffling nervously from foot to foot. Indeed, my old Buick was standing on the curb, with the bright red homeless sign on the hood visible from afar. Stacked next to the car were 4 cardboard boxes labeled, "To whom it may concern, take it." In one of them, I noticed my favorite coffee mug. In another, a stack of books, which obviously did not fit into the new interior. "Chaz, I'm so sorry." Perry put his hand on my shoulder. I didn't respond. The words stuck in my throat. Walking over to the boxes, I started going through things. The remnants of my life. The books Beverly and I had read together, the desk lamp that had stood on my desk for 30 years, a few framed family photos, an old porcelain statue Beverly had brought back from a trip to Europe. "Sir, are you okay?" I heard a voice behind me. I turned around and saw a young woman, one of the new owners of the house. She was standing on the porch looking at me anxiously. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, trying to keep my dignity. "Just getting my things." "Oh," she was clearly embarrassed. Are you the previous owner? Mr. Baxter?" "Yes, that's me." The woman stepped closer, clearly feeling uncomfortable. "I'm so sorry about the way things turned out. My husband and I didn't know. Your son said you were moving into a nursing home, and we're very happy to sell. If we had known—" "It's not your fault," I interrupted her. "You bought the house legally. It's just that my son forgot to mention certain details, like the fact that I wasn't going to sell it." At that moment, there was the sound of brakes, and a black Lexus pulled up to the curb. Edwin jumped out of it, followed by Winifred in her business suit and high heels. "Dad!" Edwin rushed to me. "We've searched the whole town. Why didn't you answer the phone?" I stared at him coldly, unmoving. Perry stood beside me, ready to support his friend in his hour of need. "Hello, Edwin." My voice sounded calm, which surprised even myself. "Winifred?" I nodded to my sister-in-law. "Chester, how glad we are to have found you." Winifred smiled her fake smile. "We were so worried. You should have called us right away when you arrived. So you could hide the evidence of the crime?" I pointed at the boxes and the mangled car. Winifred's face trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. "It's just a misunderstanding, Chester. We'll explain everything. Let's go to the car and talk in more private." The new landlady was still standing nearby, watching the scene with curiosity. "I apologize for the inconvenience," I told her. I'll get my things and won't bother you again." No, that's all right," she assured me hastily. "Stay as long as you need. If you'd like to come inside for one last look at the house, I think that would be fine." This unexpected kindness from a stranger almost made me cry, but I held back. "Thank you, but I'd rather remember him as he was." Edwin shuffled impatiently from foot to foot. "Sawkins, Dad, get in the car. Winnie and I will explain everything." I decided that I really needed to talk, if only to say what I thought about what they'd done. "Perry, could you take my car back to your place?" I asked, holding out the keys to the Buick. "And pick up these boxes?" "Sure, Ches, I'll take care of it." "Thanks, man." I turned to my son and daughter-in-law. "All right, let's talk, but not in your car. At the cafe on the corner." Edwin wanted to object, but Winifred quickly agreed. "Of course, Chester. Whatever you're comfortable with." We walked 3 blocks to a small cafe where I often had breakfast on weekends. The barista, a young girl with purple hair, recognized me and waved. "Hi, Mr. B. Haven't seen you in a while." "Hello, Rosa. I've been away." "The usual. Black coffee and apple pie?" "Yes, please." We sat down at a table in the corner. Edwin looked nervous. Winifred tense but determined. So, I began as Rosa brought our order. I'm listening to your explanation. Why did you sell my house behind my back? Edwin opened his mouth, but Winifred beat him to it. Chester, we acted solely in your interest. You are 78 years old, living alone in a large house that requires constant maintenance. Edwin and I have long said that you need something more appropriate for your age, and you decided for me, didn't you? I sipped my coffee, trying to remain calm. Without my knowledge, without my consent. We had power of attorney, Edwin interjected. It was legal. A power of attorney in the event of my incapacity, I reminded him. I am fully competent, and you know it. What you've done is called breach of trust. Call it what you want, Winifred shrugged. We were acting within the law, and I repeat, in your best interests. This house was too big for you. Besides, we got a great price. Real estate in Pasadena is at a premium right now. I gave her a long look. And where's the money from the sale? In a safe place, she answered quickly. Sumnicom will invest it so that you can live comfortably for the rest of your life. You mean you're in charge of that, too? My money? Papa, Edwin finally found his voice. Winnie and I want to take care of you. We bought a big house in Glendale with a separate guest room and a private bath. You'll live with us, under our supervision. You won't have to worry about anything. I looked at my son, trying to see the little boy Beverly and I had raised so lovingly. But all I saw was a calculating grown man who looked too much like his wife. What about my things? My books? My pictures of Beverly? We kept the most important things, Winifred said quickly. The rest, well, you know, there's not a lot of room for old things in the new house. But we bought you a new TV for your room. 50 inches, smart TV with all the features. I felt something inside me finally snap. And my car? Why did you have to write homeless on the hood? It wasn't us, Edwin exclaimed. Probably some hooligans. But Winifred could not lie as convincingly as my son. I saw something flicker in her eyes, a mixture of satisfaction and gloating. Don't lie to me now, I said tiredly. Don't compound your betrayal. There was silence in the cafe. Edwin was staring into his cup. Winifred was glaring at me, and I was leisurely finishing my apple pie, the last island of normality in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. Look, Chester, Winifred finally said, clearly deciding to change tactics. Maybe we acted too hastily. Maybe we should have waited for you to return and discuss this in person. But understand us, too. We did mean well. This house needed repairs. It was getting expensive to maintain, and you're not getting any younger. We just wanted to make sure you had a peaceful old age. Without me making decisions about my own life? I asked bitterly. You would never agree, she sighed. You're too stubborn, Chester. You always have been. I pushed my empty plate away and looked at them both. You're right about one thing. I'd never agree to sell the house I'd lived in for almost 50 years. The house where my family grew up, where my life with Beverly had been, where every corner, everything had value and meaning to me. And I would never agree to move in with you, under your supervision, as you call it. I'm a grown man, not a pet that needs looking after. Edwin finally looked up. Dad, we really meant well. You're just so stubborn, so independent. You never listened to our opinions, always insisting on your own. We didn't see any other way out. A way out of what, Edwin? What problem were you solving? I had a house. I had savings. I had a pension. I lived my life the way I wanted to, without interfering with anyone. What problem did you solve by selling my house and throwing away my stuff? The problem of the future, Winifred suddenly blurted out. You could have been hospitalized at any moment, incapacitated. Who would be in charge of selling the house, solving all the problems? It would have been all on us. Ah, there it is at last. Not concern for my welfare, but concern for your own convenience. I see, I nodded. Thank you for your honesty, Winifred. I understand now. Edwin gave his wife an angry look, but it was too late. Papa, don't listen to her. We really want you to live with us. We'll take care of everything. You'll have your own room, your own TV, and your own potty under the bed? I grinned wickedly. No, Edwin, I won't be living with you. But where will you go? There was panic in his voice. You don't have a home. Most of your savings are invested in a new house. What? I froze. Shut for an What new house? Winifred gave her husband another murderous look. What Edwin means is that we have temporarily invested some of the money from the sale in renovating our house to make it ready for you, she said quickly. It will be returned as soon as you decide how you want to use the funds. But I've already figured it out. They didn't just sell my house. They used the money from the sale to improve their own home. Ah, how much is left? I asked quietly. What? Edwin pretended not to understand the question. How much was left of the money for the house? I repeated clearly. They looked at each other, and I saw in their eyes what I expected to see, guilt and fear. We'll get it all back, Winifred said quickly. It's just that most of the money is being spent on renovations and new furniture. We've been preparing for your move. But if you insist, we can sell some things. In Kameoa, how much? I insisted on an answer. Edwin finally squeezed out. About 20% of the sale is now in the account. The rest is in the process of being invested. I was silent, digesting the information. My house sold without my consent. My belongings thrown out on the street. My money spent on renovating their home. And now they're sitting in front of me talking about care and goodness. Dad, we're going to fix this. Edwin suddenly grabbed my hand. I swear, Winnie and I will get it all back. Just give us a chance. Forgive us. I looked at his hand resting on mine, the strong, manicured hand of a successful middle-aged man. The hand I'd once held while teaching little Edwin to ride a bicycle. The hand that had now taken everything from me. Dad, please, his voice trembled. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought it was best for everyone. Forgive us. Give us a chance to make things right. I slowly released my hand. It's too late, Edwin. Some things can't be undone. Some things can't be forgiven. Winifred, always so confident, suddenly looked frightened. You can't just leave, Chester. Where will you go? What will you do? At your age... At my age, I interrupted her, I'm still capable of making my own decisions, and I've decided I don't want anything more to do with you. I got up from the table, leaving the money for coffee and pie. Don't call me. Don't look for me. Consider me dead. My voice sounded flat, emotionless. It's easier for all of us. Dad, wait! Edwin jumped up, knocking over a chair. We can fix this. Just give us an hour. 1 hour. We'll explain everything. Show you your room in the new house. Tell you about the plans. I shook my head and headed for the exit, but Edwin blocked my path. Please, Papa. 1 hour, for Mom's sake. The mention of Beverly was a low blow. I froze, staring into my son's eyes. Don't you dare use her name, I said quietly but firmly. Your mother would never approve of what you did. Never. Amar, she would want us to be a family, Edwin insisted. At least hear us out. 1 hour. Please. I glanced at my watch. It was 16:30. The fatigue and jet lag were starting to take their toll, and my head was pounding from everything that had happened. Okay, I finally agreed. 1 hour, no more. Thanks, Dad, Edwin glowed. You won't regret it. We'll explain everything, show you everything. You'll see that we really meant well. I doubted it, but I decided to hear them out. Not for the sake of reconciliation, that's not going to happen, but for the sake of clarity, to understand once and for all how my only son could betray me so cruelly. We left the cafe and headed for their Lexus. Edwin smiled nervously. Winifred kept a stony expression on her face. I followed them, feeling the strange calm of a man who had lost everything and was now free of the weight of attachments. The Pine View Motel was not the place I had envisioned myself at 78. The cracked plaster on the walls, the sagging mattress, the leaky faucet in the bathroom. It was like the set of a movie about a loser at the bottom of his life. The voices of the neighbors could be heard through the thin walls, and at night a car alarm regularly honked somewhere nearby. Yet this dreary room was now my only refuge. After that meeting with Edwin and Winifred, I returned to the motel exhausted. The trip to their new home in Glendale, their insincere apologies and their attempts to impress me with the so-called daddy's room had finally convinced me that I had made the right decision. I couldn't live with people who had betrayed me in such cold blood. The room they had prepared had been arranged with ostentatious care. A new bed with an orthopedic mattress, a huge TV on the wall, even special handrails in the bathroom for convenience. But there was a sense of condescension in every detail. It was not a room for a relative, but a ward in a sanatorium for infirm old people. Crowning it all was a panic button by the bed. In case you get sick, Dad. As if I were some kind of invalid, unable to call for help on my own. I endured this farce for exactly 1 hour, as promised, then hailed a cab and left without saying goodbye. Edwin ran after the car almost to the corner of the street, shouting and waving his arms. Winifred stood on the porch with her arms crossed over her chest and her lips pressed together. At that moment, I firmly decided that I would never do business with them again. And now, 3 days later, I sat on the edge of my bed in the motel room and stared at my cell phone screen, where it read 27 missed calls, all from Edwin. I'd listened to a dozen voicemails over the days, each more desperate than the last. Daddy, please call back. Daddy, we're worried. Daddy, let's talk like adults. Daddy, don't be so stubborn. Think about your health. The last message was particularly noteworthy. Winifred dryly informed me that if I continued to act like an abused child, they would be forced to contact social services to have my mental health checked. Threats. That's what it came down to. I muted the sound on my phone and put it in my nightstand drawer. Then I went to the window and pulled open the faded curtains. The view was unremarkable. A motel parking lot filled with used cars, a busy street behind it, and a row of monotonous commercial buildings beyond. Not a single tree, not a scrap of green. Not like the view from the window of my house where every morning I watch the sun rise over the crowns of the trees on Lambert Avenue. The house. Even the thought of it caused a sharp pain somewhere under my ribs. Not just a structure, but the place where my entire life had been spent. Where Beverly and I had raised Edwin, where we'd celebrated Christmas and birthdays, where I'd held her hand in the last days before she died. All those memories attached to the walls, to each room, to the garden behind the house, all of it now belonged to strangers. And the bitterest part was that it was my own son who sold the house. The man for whom Beverly and I had sacrificed everything. Time, money, dreams. I still remembered how we'd given up the trip to Europe Beverly had dreamed of to pay for Edwin's first semester of college. He dropped out after 3 months, declaring that it wasn't his thing. Beverly cried then, but still defended him. He just hasn't found his way yet, Chaz. I wonder what she would say now. Would she find an excuse for betraying our son? Would she be able to forgive him? I sank heavily into the only chair in the room. My shoulders ached from the strain of the last few days, and my head felt heavy. At 78, I found myself without a home, without most of my savings, and with a family that had betrayed me. It was an unenviable situation, to say the least. But I wasn't going to give up. Something in me, the same stubborn determination that had gotten me through the Korean War, my parents' deaths, Beverly's departure, didn't let me give up. I had to start over, find a place to live, get settled, make a new life. It seemed almost impossible at my age, but I couldn't see any other options. There was a quiet knock at the door. I froze, not wanting to see anyone. Perhaps it was the maid or someone had gotten the wrong number. But the knock came again, more insistent. Chaz, it's Perry. Open up, please. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to open the door. There was my old friend standing on the doorstep with a plastic container in his hands. Hi, Chaz. He looked worried. Check to Panarm. Thought I'd check on you. Brought you dinner. Martha made her famous meatloaf. Martha, Perry's wife, was a great cook. I felt my stomach respond with a hunger cramp. I hadn't eaten much the last few days, eating mostly coffee from the vending machine in the motel lobby. Come on in, I stepped aside, letting my friend into the room. I'm sorry about the ambiance. Perry looked around with undisguised disappointment. Jesus, Chaz, this place is a shithole. You can't stay here. Temporary solution, I tried to sound confident, while I look for an apartment. An apartment? In Pasadena? With your pension? Perry was not a tactful man. Did you see how much the rent is now? Maybe not in Pasadena, I admitted. Maybe Altadena or Monrovia. Somewhere cheaper. Perry set the container on a small table by the window and turned to me. Chaz, Martha, and I have been talking about this. We have a guest room. You can stay with us until you decide what to do next. I shook my head. Thank you, but no, I don't want to be a burden. What burden? Perry was outraged. You're my best friend. We've known each other for 30 years. Of course you'll live with us. Perry, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I've got to handle this on my own. Stubborn ass, he grumbled. Always has been. Well, I won't insist. For now. But will you at least eat? Martha would be offended if she knew you'd refused her cooking. I smiled weakly. Anything for Martha. We sat down at a small table. I enjoyed the meatloaf while Perry told me the latest news from the neighborhood. Mrs. Johnston is going to move in with her daughter in Florida. The Hendersons finally decided to cut down that huge maple tree that was shading half the street. The Thompson house had a water main break, flooding the entire first floor. Ordinary, even trivial news, but it connected me to my old life, to the world I knew and loved. Edwin was here, Perry said suddenly. He was looking for you. I said I didn't know where you were. I put my fork down. Thank you. He looked upset, Chaz. Really upset. I bet he was. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. His plan had fallen apart. He was counting on me to move in quietly and give the rest of my savings to them to manage. Could he really be remorseful? No, I was sure. Edwin's only remorse is that he got caught. It's always been like that, ever since he was a kid. Remember when he smashed your greenhouse with that ball? He cried and apologized when we caught him. The next day he bragged to his friends that he'd made a great shot and shattered old man Huxley's glass. Perry hummed, remembering. Yes, there was something like that. But people change, Chaz. He's a grown man now. A grown man doesn't sell his father's house behind his back. I cut him off. And he doesn't throw his stuff out on the street with a "take it if you want it" sign on it. Perry didn't have an answer. We finished our dinner in silence. Then he left. My offer still stands, Chess. The guest room is all yours. Thanks, man. I'll think about it. With Perry gone, I was once again alone with my oppressive thoughts. The prospect of living with friends, even friends as close as Huxley, was unpleasant. Not because of them, Perry and Martha are fine people, but because of myself. I'd been an independent person all my life. Never asked for help, never relied on other people's charity. To start that now, at the end of my life, seemed humiliating. No, I had to find my own place. Small, modest, but my own. A place where I could spend my remaining years with dignity. I pulled my cell phone out of the nightstand. 29 missed calls now, and a new text message from Edwin. Dad, please call me back. I'll come get you wherever you say. We'll make it right. I swear. We will. Like what they did can be fixed. As if my house, my things, my trust in my son could be returned. I deleted the message without responding. Then I opened my browser and started searching for information on apartment rentals in the Los Angeles suburbs. The prices made me cringe. Even a tiny studio in a not-so-wealthy neighborhood cost almost my entire monthly pension. And I still had to live on something, to buy food, medicine. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. The situation seemed hopeless. Maybe I really should take Perry up on his offer, at least temporarily, until I could find another option. The sound of a message interrupted my thoughts. I grudgingly glanced at the screen, expecting to see another text from Edwin, but it was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Baxter, this is Carol Hammond. Perry gave me your number. I've heard about your situation and would like to talk. Perhaps tomorrow over a cup of coffee? Carol Hammond. That name brought back vague memories. Carol. Ah, yes, the widow of Jack Hammond, the physics teacher from our school. We worked together many years ago. Lovely woman, always bringing home baking to school assemblies. After Jack died, I think she moved away somewhere. Or did she? I wasn't sure I wanted to date anyone now, especially someone who knew about my situation. But it would be rude to refuse. Besides, a cup of coffee and pleasant company isn't the worst way to spend an hour or two. Hello, Mrs. Hammond. I'd be happy to meet you. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the coffee shop on the corner of Colorado and Lake Avenue? The answer came almost instantly. Great. And please call me Carol. See you tomorrow, Mr. Baxter. I put the phone away, feeling oddly relieved. Simple social interaction, scheduling a meeting. These mundane activities were bringing a sense of normalcy back into my upside-down life. There was another knock on the door, this time louder and more insistent. I tensed. Perry couldn't be back so soon, and the knocking was different, more demanding. "Dad, I know you're in there. Open up." "Edwin." I froze, unmoving and barely breathing, like a child hiding from a monster in a closet. "Dad, please, I just want to talk. 5 minutes." The knocking got louder and louder. I imagined the other motel guests peering out of their rooms, attracted by the noise. The last thing I wanted was to be the center of a scandal. "Chester Baxter, I know you can hear me." It was Winifred's voice now. "Stop acting like a child. Open this door at once." My sister-in-law's commanding tone made me clench my fists. How dare she speak to me like that, after everything they've done? "Sir, are you in trouble?" Came a new voice that sounded like it belonged to the motel manager. "Are these people bothering you?" "We're his family," Winifred said indignantly. "We have a right to see him." "I don't care who you are," the manager replied calmly. "If the guest doesn't want to see you, you'll have to leave. Otherwise, I'll call the police." Silence, then muffled voices. Edwin and Winifred were obviously arguing with each other. "All right," Edwin said at last, clearly addressing me through the door. "We'll leave. But that's not the end of it, Dad. We'll keep coming back until you talk to us. We're your family, and we won't leave you." Their footsteps fell silent in the distance. I went to the window and watched them get into their Lexus Edwin at the wheel. Winifred in the passenger seat, her back expressing extreme indignation even from a distance. "Sir?" the manager called quietly. "They're gone. Are you all right?" I opened the door. A young man in a shirt with a motel logo stood in front of me. Yes, thank you." I felt awkward. "I'm sorry to bother you." "It's okay," he smiled in a friendly way. "Family problems, huh? It happens. If they come back and make trouble, call the front desk right away. We'll take care of it." "Thank you," I repeated, surprised by his friendliness. "You're welcome, Mr. Baxter. Have a good evening." Closing the door, I went back to the bed and sank down heavily on it. Surely Edwin and Winifred would not give up so easily. They would come again and again, trying to get through to me, to convince me to come back under their caring wing. The thought of the forthcoming scenes of confrontation only made me tired. I had to find a new place to live as soon as possible. A place where Edwin couldn't get to me, where I could start a new life, leaving betrayal and pain behind. After all, what did I have? A pension, not luxurious but stable, a small savings in a bank account that, thank God, Edwin didn't have access to. My old Buick, which was now parked in front of Perry's house. Not so little for a fresh start. I've always been an independent person. All my life I'd made decisions on my own, never relying on anyone else's help. Even after Beverly's death, when it seemed like the world had fallen apart, I'd managed to pull myself together and move on with my life. This situation was no more difficult, just another challenge to overcome. At 78 years old, I had to make a fresh start. Find a place to live, get settled, create a new home. It seemed almost an impossible task, especially at my age. But I had no choice. Edwin and Winifred had taken the past from me, but the future still belonged to me. And I intended to live it on my own terms, with the dignity and independence I'd always valued. I pulled a shabby notebook and pen out of my suitcase. It was time to make a plan. When I was younger, I had always done this in difficult situations. I wrote down the problems and possible solutions. This method had never failed me. On the first page, I wrote, "A plan for a new life." It sounded a little high-minded, but it got the point across. Then I started listing items. 1. Housing. Find an affordable apartment or studio, perhaps outside of Pasadena, where it's cheaper. 2. Stuff. Pick up the rest of Perry's stuff. Buy the essentials for the new place. 3. Finances. Calculate available funds. Make a budget. 4. Legal issues. Find out if anything can be done about the illegal sale of the house and the misappropriation of funds. I thought about that last point. Was it worth it to start a legal battle with my own son? The process could drag on for years, requires substantial funds I didn't have, and with no guarantee of success. Besides, as Edwin said, the power of attorney was technically valid, but it wasn't even a legal matter. I just didn't want anything more to do with Edwin and Winifred. No contact, no ties. A lawsuit would mean a continued relationship, albeit in a confrontational way. and I wanted a complete breakup. I crossed out the fourth item and wrote in its place, 4. New acquaintances. Stay in touch with myself. Maintain social contacts. That sounded reasonable. I couldn't afford to turn into a lonely, embittered old man, confined within four walls with my resentment. I still had friends, Perry and Martha, maybe Carol Hammond. I could find new interests, new activities. Outside the window it was completely dark. The clock read almost 11 p.m., but sleep was not coming. There were too many thoughts swarming in my head, too many emotions churning inside. I turned on the small TV on the wall, hoping that the monotonous muttering of the news anchors would help me calm down. But even without listening to the words, I could feel my eyes starting to slip shut. The fatigue of the last few days had finally taken its toll. Before falling asleep, I took one last look at my new life plan. Tomorrow would start a new day, the first day of my new life, and I was determined to make it worthwhile, despite all the obstacles. The morning was surprisingly clear. The sun was shining through the thin curtains of the motel room, creating fanciful patterns on the wall. I woke up earlier than usual, around 6 in the morning, which was unusual for me in recent years. Perhaps it was the hard mattress, or the nervous tension of the last few days, or maybe it was the upcoming meeting with Carol Hammond. Carol. My memories of her were warm but vague. We worked at the same school, occasionally crossing paths at faculty meetings or school events. She taught English literature, if memory serves me correctly. A tall, stately woman with a straight back and attentive brown eyes. Always elegantly dressed, always with a book in hand. Her husband, Jack Hammond, a physics teacher, was a good-natured lout with an infectious laugh. He and I would sometimes play chess in the teacher's lounge during long breaks. He was a good man, but it was a pity he died so early. A heart attack at the age of 52. After he died, I think Carol retired and moved away. Or did she? A snippet of conversation with Beverly came to mind. Carol bought that little house on Orange Grove Avenue, you know? The one with the blue shutters? Said she wanted a quiet place for her books and memories. She must have still lived in Pasadena, since Perry had found her so easily. I got out of bed, feeling my joints crunch, and headed for the bathroom. The water pipes hummed protestingly as I opened the faucet, and first rusty and then clear, but barely warm water flowed out. After washing and shaving, I took a critical look at myself in the mirror. The face reflected in the murky glass was that of an old man. Deep wrinkles, bags under his eyes, thinning gray hair. When had this happened? In my head, I was still that energetic 50-year-old teacher who could teach 6 lessons in a row and then take the class on a field trip to the museum. Now every movement was a struggle. Every morning began with an inventory of new pains. I opened my suitcase, deciding what to wear. There wasn't much to choose from. A few shirts, a pair of pants, a sweater. Everything else was left in the house, which now belonged to strangers, or in boxes on the street that had probably already been taken apart by random passersby. Dressed in a clean blue shirt and gray slacks, I felt a little more confident. It was still 3 hours until my meeting with Carol, so I decided to walk to the cafe to clear my head. The Pasadena Brew Cafe on the corner of Colorado and Lake Avenue was one of those places that tries to look both modern and retro at the same time. Brick walls, vintage coffee machines behind the counter, but still free Wi-Fi and outlets at every table. I arrived half an hour earlier than the appointed time and chose a table by the window, ordering a simple black coffee. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door of the cafe opened and a woman walked in. I didn't immediately recognize her as Carol Hammond. She had changed a lot since the last time I'd seen her. Her once brown hair was now completely gray, gathered in a neat bun at the back of her head. Her face, which had always been characterized by noble restraint, was now covered with a mesh of wrinkles, but her eyes, those attentive brown eyes, were still the same. "Chester," her voice sounded warmer than I remembered. "It's so good to see you." I rose to greet her. "Carol, you look beautiful." "What a gentleman," she smiled softly. "And such a liar. I know exactly what I look like in my 74 years. Ha ha, how long has it been since we've seen each other? 10 years? 15? I think it was at Jack's funeral the last time," I said carefully. "That was, 18 years ago," she finished quietly. "Time flies, doesn't it?" Perry told me about your situation, she said as the waitress stepped away. I'm sorry, Chester. I shrugged awkwardly. That's life. It doesn't work out smoothly for everyone. Still, what your son did, it's awful. Yes. I didn't see the point in denying the obvious. Edwin has always been a difficult child. Carol looked at me carefully. You've always been too kind to him. Even now you say complicated when anyone else would say heartless or selfish. Her directness caught me off guard. Had Carol always been like this? Or had the years of widowhood made her more blunt? Maybe you're right, I admitted. Yeah, Beverly had always defended him too. Maybe that was our mistake. Where are you staying now? Carol changed the subject. The Pine View Motel on the edge of town. Temporary solution while I look for an apartment. The Pine View, she frowned. It's a dump, Chester. Cockroaches don't even live there. They're too squeamish. I couldn't hold back a chuckle. It's not that bad. At least it's clean. Well, relatively. Ah. How long do you plan to stay there? I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm looking into renting, but with my pension, you know. Carol looked thoughtfully out the window, where cars and pedestrians were passing by. I have a suggestion, Chester, she said at last. There's a guest house on my property. It's small but cozy. Living room, bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, fully furnished. I sometimes rent it out to visiting professors or students, but right now it's empty. You could stay there until you get your situation sorted out. I looked at her in surprise. Carol, that's very generous of you, but no buts. She held up her hand, stopping me. It's not charity, if that's what you're worried about. You'll pay the rent, small but fair, and help me with the garden sometimes. I've got arthritis. It's hard to bend over the flower beds. The offer was tempting. A guest house sounded a lot better than a dreary motel room or a tiny apartment somewhere in an undesirable neighborhood. I'll think about it, I replied. It's very unexpected. Come on, Chester, Carol smiled. We've known each other for 30 years. Both widowed, both former teachers. I'm not suggesting you move into my house. You'll have your own space. She had a point. And yet the instinct for independence that had always been strong in me resisted. I'll need to see the cabin before I decide, I said, trying to sound practical rather than ungrateful. Of course, Carol nodded. Come by tonight, say 6 o'clock, Orange Grove Avenue 123. Blue shutters, white fence. There's no mistaking it. 6 o'clock, I agreed. Thanks, Carol. As I drove back to the motel, I felt strangely exhilarated. Carol's suggestion might be just the solution I needed. A guest house, an independent life, but not complete solitude. A worthy alternative to a humiliating return to Edwin and Winifred, or a miserable existence as a bird at Perry's. As I thought about it, I didn't immediately notice the black Lexus parked in front of the motel entrance. It wasn't until Edwin and Winifred jumped out that I realized they'd tracked me down again. Dad! Edwin came running across the street. At last! We've been waiting for you for 2 hours. How did you find me? I asked, already guessing the answer. Mr. Know-it-all, Huxley blabbed, Winifred said with obvious contempt. After we'd put a little pressure on him. Poor Perry. They must have kept him busy, harassing him with calls and visits until he gave in. What do you want? I didn't see the point in being nice. To talk, Edwin looked worried. Please, Papa, 10 minutes, in my car, so no one overhears. I hesitated. On the one hand, I had no desire to listen to their excuses and false promises again. On the other hand, maybe this was a chance to finally put a stop to it, to make my position clear and get rid of their harassment. All right, I agreed. 10 minutes, no more. We crossed the road and got into the Lexus Edwin at the wheel, Winifred in the back seat, me in the passenger seat. The cabin smelled of new leather and some kind of luscious air freshener. Dad, Edwin began, turning to me, Winnie and I have talked it over. We realize what we did was terrible, and we want to make it right. How? I asked dryly. Will you give me my house back? My belongings? My trust? We'll buy you a new house, Edwin said quickly. Smaller, of course, but in a nice neighborhood. And a new car. Anything you want. With what money? I couldn't help the irony. You said yourself that you'd spent almost all of it on renovating your place. Edwin exchanged a quick glance with Winifred. However, we could take out a mortgage, he said, or we could sell our house and buy something smaller, as long as you forgive us. And back under our control, I added. Isn't that the point? You're afraid I'll sue you for fraud, or that I'll embarrass you in front of your friends and coworkers by telling them what you did. Winifred lunged forward, her face contorted with anger. You ungrateful old man, she lashed out, shuddering. We offer you a new house, a new car, and you keep blaming us. Winnie, don't, Edwin tried to calm his wife. Dad has a right to be angry. How much is really left of the money for the house? I asked straight out. What? Edwin pretended not to understand the question. Don't lie to me again, Edwin. My voice sounded tired but firm. How much money do you have left? You said 20%, but I saw your face. You were lying. He lowered his eyes, unable to bear my gaze. 5%, he finally squeezed out. Maybe a little more. We had debts, Dad. Credit cards, personal loans. We had to pay it off. That's it. They weren't just fixing up the house. They were paying off their own debts. My money. Money I've saved up all my life, saving from every paycheck, denying myself trips and entertainment. Ah, you used the money from the sale of my house to pay off your debts? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. We had no choice, Winifred exclaimed. The debt collectors were calling every day. The bank was threatening to repossess the car. And you sat in your house, which had long ago become too big for you, and saved up money that would have gone to us when you died anyway. Edwin threw his wife a murderous look, but it was too late. She had said what she really thought. That's it, I said slowly. So you just decided to speed up the process, not wait for me to die. There was a heavy silence. Edwin looked like he was about to fall through the ground. Dad, we didn't, he stammered. That's not what Winnie meant. That's exactly what I meant. I didn't see the point in pretending. And you know what the saddest part is? If you'd just come to me and honestly tell me you had a problem, I'd help. Because no matter what, you're my son. Edwin looked up at me, eyes full of tears. I'm sorry, Dad. Please, I'll make it up to you. I swear it. No, Edwin, I shook my head. Some things can't be fixed. Trust is one of them. I won't live with you, and I don't want to see you again. You betrayed me, and I can't forgive that. But we are family, Edwin exclaimed. We stopped being family the moment you decided to sell my house behind my back, I replied calmly. Family doesn't do that to each other. I opened the car door and got out. Edwin jumped out after me. Dad, wait, we can fix this. We'll sell the house, take out a loan, find the money. Goodbye, Edwin. I didn't turn around. And tell Winifred I don't hold a grudge. I just don't want anything to do with you anymore. I moved toward the motel entrance, leaving my son standing on the sidewalk. For the first time in a long time, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had finally fallen from my shoulders. In my room, I sat on the bed and took out a notebook with a plan for a new life. Item 1 was housing. Perhaps Carol's offer was exactly what I needed. I glanced at the clock, almost 5. It was time to get ready to meet Carol. Changing into a clean shirt, I left my few belongings in the room and hailed a cab through the app Edwin had once installed for me. Carol's house was easily recognized by the blue shutters and white fence, just as she had said it would be. It was a small but well-maintained one-story house in the style of a California bungalow. The garden in front of the house had been laid out with obvious love, neatly trimmed bushes, brightly colored flowers, a small fountain in the middle of the lawn. I paid the driver and walked to the gate. Before I could ring the bell, the door of the house opened and Carol appeared on the doorstep. Right on time, she smiled. Come on in, Chester. Let's check out the guest house first and then we'll have dinner. I made lasagna. I hope you like Italian food. The guest house was at the back of the garden, behind the main building. It was a small structure that looked like a smaller copy of the main house. The same blue shutters, the same architecture. Inside the house was cozy, with everything necessary for a comfortable life. What do you think? Carol asked when we'd finished looking around. Is it okay? It's fine, I said. More than okay. How much do you want for the rent? Carol quoted an amount that was well below market value. I knew she was doing me a favor, but I decided to accept. In my position, pride was an unacceptable luxury. Carol's guest house was a real lifesaver for me. I moved in the very next day after the inspection, taking my few belongings from the motel in Perry's old Buick. The cabin was exactly what I needed, a cozy, independent space where I could quietly think about my next steps. For the first week, I just came to my senses. I laid out the rest of my belongings, got used to the new place, and occasionally helped Carol in the garden as promised. She was the perfect neighbor, attentive but not intrusive. We sometimes had dinner together, discussing books, politics, memories of school, but never my situation with Edwin and Winifred. It was as if Carol understood that I needed time to decide for myself what to do, but I couldn't hide in that quiet corner forever, pretending nothing had happened. The more time passed, the more the feeling of injustice grew in me. No, not resentment, just injustice. What Edwin and Winifred had done was not just a betrayal of a loved one, it was a crime. They had used a power of attorney that had been granted under specific circumstances and for specific purposes to fraudulently take possession of my property. On the 10th day of my stay with Carol, I made up my mind and called my old acquaintance Howard Bryan, a civil litigation attorney who had once helped me with the paperwork after Beverly's death. "Chester," Howard's voice sounded surprised. "Haven't heard from you in a while. How you doing, old man?" "I've been better, Howard. I need a consult. When can you see me? Is it something serious?" Howard's voice had a professional note in it. "Enough," I replied. "My son sold my house using the power of attorney I gave him in case I was incapacitated. I am fully competent, and I did not consent to the sale." There was a pause, then Howard whistled. "That's a twist. Come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and bring a copy of the power of attorney if you have one." "I don't," I admitted bitterly. "No, all the documents were in the house." "That's all right. We'll ask a notary. See you tomorrow, Chester." I hung up the phone and felt my resolve growing inside me. I'm 78 years old. I've lost my wife, my home, most of my savings, and my trust in my only child. But I'm still alive, still sane, and I'm not going to let anyone, not even my own son, deceive me with impunity. The next morning I drove to Howard's office in my shabby Buick. The law firm of Bryan and Associates was located in a small two-story building in the business district of Pasadena. Howard personally met me in the reception area, a tall, gaunt man of about 65 with thinning gray hair and piercing blue eyes. "Chester," he shook my hand firmly. "Come on in. Coffee?" "Huh? I'd love some," I replied, following him into his office. Howard's office was exactly what a successful lawyer's office should be: an oak desk, leather chairs, and walls hung with diplomas and photos of famous people. We were seated at a small round table in the corner of the office, and Howard poured coffee from a silver coffee pot. "So," he leaned back in his chair, "tell me everything in order." I explained the situation as dryly and businesslike as possible, trying not to get emotional. Howard listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions or making notes in his notebook. "As I understand it," he summarized when I finished, "your son and his wife used the power of attorney granted in the event of your incapacity to sell your house without your consent. They used the money from the sale to pay off their own debts and renovate their home. Now you're staying at a friend's house, in a guest house, and you want to know if you can hold your son accountable and recover at least some of the money." "That's right," I nodded. "Well," Howard drummed his fingers on the table, "legally speaking, we have a cause of action. A power of attorney, even a general power of attorney, doesn't give you the right to act against the interests of the principal. Your son has clearly overstepped his authority and used the power of attorney for personal gain. That would qualify as fraud." I felt strangely relieved that my suspicions were confirmed. This was indeed a crime, not just looking out for my welfare, as Edwin and Winifred had assured me. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "First, revoke the power of attorney immediately," Howard answered. "We'll do it today. Second, file a lawsuit to invalidate the sale of the house and for damages. This may be difficult, given that the house has already been sold to third parties who are likely to be bona fide purchasers. But we can seek compensation from your son. And if he doesn't have the money?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Then the court can seize his assets, including his house, cars, bank accounts." Howard was ruthless. "It might take time, but sooner or later you'll get your money. Or at least some of it." I wondered, The picture Howard was painting was unpleasant months of litigation, a public confrontation with his own son, perhaps even criminal prosecution. But the alternative was even worse, to let what Edwin and Winifred had done go unpunished, to let them think they could cheat and betray their loved ones with impunity. "I want to sue," I said firmly. "How much will it cost?" Howard named a sum that made me cringe. But I had no choice. Justice had to be served, even if it meant spending the last of my savings. "All right," I nodded. "When can we start?" "Right now," Howard opened his laptop. "Let's draw up an application for revocation of power of attorney, and tomorrow we'll prepare a statement of claim. You'll have to sign some documents and testify." We spent the next 2 hours drafting documents and discussing strategy. As I left Howard's office, I felt heavy, but I knew I was doing the right thing. It wasn't a matter of revenge, it was a matter of justice. On the way home, I stopped at a small roadside cafe for a bite to eat. Sitting at a table by the window with a cup of coffee and a sandwich, I pondered the battle ahead. Edwin wouldn't give up easily. Of that I was sure. He had inherited stubbornness from me and ingenuity from Beverly. Winifred would bring her own calculating and ruthlessness to the mix. My phone vibrated with a message from Edwin. "Dad, Winnie and I have been thinking about our conversation. You're right, we did a terrible thing. We're ready to make it right. Please let's meet and discuss how we can make amends." Too late, I thought. Now it would be up to the courts to handle it. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I finished my coffee, paid, and headed to my car. Now that the decision was made, I felt strangely calm. Be what it would. The trial began 3 weeks after my visit with Howard. As the lawyer had predicted, the trial was grueling. Edwin had hired an expensive lawyer who tried to prove that my son had acted within the scope of the power of attorney and with good intentions. Winifred even burst into tears at one of the hearings, assuring the court that they only wanted to ensure that I would have a decent old age in their home. But the facts were on my side. The power of attorney was indeed limited to cases of my incapacity, as confirmed by the notary. I provided medical certificates proving my full capacity at the time of the sale of the house. Moreover, Howard was able to prove that Edwin and Winifred had spent the money from the sale to pay off their own debts, not for my welfare. 4 months into the trial, 4 months of hearings, depositions, forensic examinations, nerves, and mounting legal bills. I hardly saw Edwin outside the courtroom. He avoided my gaze, entering and exiting through different doors. Winifred, on the other hand, would defiantly look me in the eye with an expression of cold hatred every time. Finally, in mid-fall, the court ruled in my favor. The sale of my house was recognized as invalid. But since the new owners were recognized as bona fide purchasers, the house remained with them. Instead, the court ordered Edwin and Winifred to pay me the full value of the house, as well as compensation for moral damages and legal fees. It would seem that I won. But as it turned out, it was a Pyrrhic victory. When it came to foreclosure, it was discovered that Edwin and Winifred had virtually no assets left. Their house was mortgaged to the hilt, their cars were on credit, and their accounts were empty. As Howard explained to me, getting the money in this situation could take years, if not decades. The court could seize some of Edwin and Winifred's income, but that would mean that I would receive a small amount each month, a crumb of what I was entitled to. "Well," I said after hearing this disappointing news in Howard's office, at least justice had been done. Not material justice, but moral justice. Howard looked at me with sympathy. "Chester, I want you to know we can keep fighting. There are other options, criminal prosecution for fraud, additional civil suits." "No," I shook my head. "That's enough. I got what I wanted, confirmation that I was right. Let Edwin and Winifred live with that knowledge. Sometimes guilt is a worse punishment than financial loss." Howard nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe Edwin and Winifred were capable of real remorse. Perhaps he was right, but that no longer mattered to me. Leaving Howard's office for the last time, I felt not disappointment, but a strange relief. The trial had confirmed what I'd known all along. I'd been the victim of betrayal and deception by the people closest to me. But now it was recorded officially in the court records. My righteousness was proven not only to myself, but to the whole world. That same evening, sitting in Carol's guest house, I wrote Edwin one last message. "The court has put everything in its place. I won't ask you for money. It won't give me my house back or heal the wound of betrayal. Consider this my last gift to you, but I don't want to see you or Winifred again. Don't call, don't write, don't come. You no longer exist for me. Goodbye, Edwin. I pressed send and immediately blocked his number. Then I did the same with Winifred's number. It was the final breakup, the last point in our relationship. Carol found me sitting on the veranda of the guest house with a glass of whiskey, a rare luxury for me. Is everything all right? She asked, coming closer. Yes, I answered, surprised at the calmness in my voice. I'm finally done with the past. Now I can think about the future. And how do you see it, the future? Carol sat down next to me on the wicker chair. I don't know yet, I admitted honestly. But I still have a pension, a little savings, and a roof over my head thanks to you. That's more than most people have. You could stay here, Carol suggested, not as a temporary solution, but permanently. I enjoy your company, Chester, and you're doing a great job with the roses in the garden. I looked at her in surprise. Stay here forever? The thought had never crossed my mind. I had always thought of the guest house as a temporary home until the situation with Edwin was resolved. But now that it was over, I'll think about it, I replied. Thank you for the offer. Take your time, Carol said, smiling softly. You have time. We both have time. She walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I looked up at the sky, where the first stars were already beginning to show. The future. What a strange concept for someone my age. At 78, one doesn't usually make far-reaching plans. And yet, it's been 6 months since that night. I never moved out of Carol's place. On the contrary, I officially became a tenant of the guest house, signing a real contract and insisting on a fair rent. Carol and I have established a comfortable rhythm of neighborliness. Sometimes we dine together, sometimes we spend evenings talking or playing board games, but we each have our own space and independence. There hasn't been a word from Edwin in all this time. I think he finally realized that I was serious about completely severing the relationship. Sometimes, especially in the first few months, I caught myself thinking about him, how he was doing, what he was doing, what he was thinking. But every day those thoughts came less and less often, and the pain of betrayal became duller and duller, turning from a sharp, cutting pain to a deafening, barely perceptible one. Today I sit in my little cottage, as I now call the guest house, and stare at the picture of Beverly that sits on my bedside table. It's one of the few things I managed to salvage from my old home thanks to Perry. In the picture, Beverly is smiling the way I remember her best, with that soft, understanding smile that spoke more than any words. You know, Bev, I said aloud, though no one was in the cabin. Sometimes I think it's all for the best. Yes, losing the house was hard. Losing my son was even harder. But now I am free from toxic relationships, from constant tension, from having to defend myself and make excuses. Maybe for the first time in years, I am truly free. It's ridiculous to talk about freedom at 78 years old. At an age when most people think of illness, of dependence on others, of the approaching end. But I feel unexpectedly light. It's as if the heavy burden I've carried for years, caring for Edwin, worrying about his future, trying to understand and forgive his actions, has finally fallen from my shoulders. And without that burden, I can move on, breathe fully, enjoy each day. I put the picture back on the nightstand and walk over to the window. In the garden, Carol is tending to her roses, her graying head bent over a bush, her hands in gardening gloves carefully trimming the wilted blossoms. A simple, peaceful picture, part of my new life. Tomorrow, Perry and Martha and I are going to a classical music concert in the city park. The day after tomorrow, I've signed up for a computer course for the elderly at the local library, determined to finally learn the technique properly without Edwin's prompting. And next week, Carol and I are planning a day trip to Santa Barbara, just for a change of scenery. Little plans, little joys. But they give my days meaning and my heart a peace I haven't known in a very long time. I am free from the worries of Edwin's future, from his constant demands and manipulations, from Winifred's condescending tone and her undisguised desire to get hold of my money. I am free from the need to be constantly on guard, waiting for the next trick or request for financial help. And even though I've lost my home, most of my savings, and my only son, I haven't lost myself. I didn't lose my dignity. I didn't lose my ability to see the beauty of life, even in its sunset hours. In my 78 years, I began a new chapter. Not as bright and stormy as the previous ones, but in its own way deep and significant. And this chapter belongs to me alone. No toxic relationships, no betrayal, no pain. Just peace, freedom, and the quiet dignity of years gone by. Okay, Bev, I whisper, looking up into the sky where the evening clouds are gathering. It's okay now.